I'm very glad to continue our conference, which started on a very good note. My name is Oren Yeftakhel. I teach in Ben-Gurion University. I'm one of the founders of the Land for All movement and very, very interested in looking for new paradigms for Israel-Palestine peace, for getting out of the apartheid situation into which we are heading for the last couple of decades. So this, appropriately, this session will be about new models of partnership in the joint space, מודלים של שותפות במרחב משותף. אוקיי? המושב יתנהל בעברית, אבל יהיה תרגום לערבית תרגום לערבית ולאנגלית לטובת המשתתפים האחרים. אני רוצה להעיר הערה אחת קטנה, שהטיעון המרכזי של אסד רנם, שדיבר מאוד מאוד יפה לדעתי, הוא בכל זאת מוטעה מבחינה היסטורית. היו לא מעט קונפדרציות שקמו בלי שהיו מדינות עצמאיות לפני כן. כן? אם זה אנחנו מדברים על נורבגיה ושוודיה, לא הייתה מדינה נורבגית, זה היה חלק מהשחרור משוודיה. לא הייתה מדינה גרמנית או איטלקית בשוויצריה, והיא קמה כקונפדרציה. לא הייתה מדינה צרפתית עצמאית, היה חלק מהאימפריה, אבל לא הייתה מדינה צרפתית עצמאית בקנדה, והיא קמה כקונפדרציה. תחשבו על זה להמשך הדיונים שלנו. יהיו לנו שלוש הרצאות מעניינות. אנחנו נתחיל עם גדעון אלעזר ופיל סנדרס, שהם דברו על סלילת הדרך לשיתוף פתרונות פדרליים לסכסוך הישראלי-פלסטיני. גדעון אלעזר הוא מרצה במדעי הרוח בלימודי דת באוניברסיטת בר אילן. פיל סנדרס יציג את עצמו כי לא קיבלתי הקדמה. בבקשה, הבמה שלכם. כל הרצאה תהיה 15 דקות.
אנחנו ניקח 20 כי אנחנו מפצלים לשניים, אז ככה זה נאמר. פתרון חד צדדי. כן. לא, זה בתיאום עם הרשויות. טוב, שלום לכולם. אני גדעון אלעזר אני ופיל נייצג פה את הפורום הפדרלי, ואנחנו נדבר בהמשך, אני אנסה להציג קצת את הפורום. אז קודם כל אני רוצה לברך על הכנס הזה, שבאמת אני רואה בו חידוש גדול, וחלק מהמהלך שאנחנו מנסים להניע, אנחנו ועוד הרבה אנשים אחרים, לשנות את הפרדיגמה הנוכחית ולצאת מהקיבוע שמאפיין לצערי עדיין את מרבית התושבים באזור, גם מימין וגם משמאל, גם ישראלים וגם פלסטינים, המחשבה של היפרדות מוחלטת והרעיון של, פעם קראו לזה גירושים. כן, בעצם אנחנו טוענים שהסיפור הזה, אני חושב שזה ברור כבר לכולנו, ראינו גם את הסקרים, שהסיפור הזה של היפרדות, של הפרדה באופן מוחלט, הוא לא אפשרי, ובמקום להשקיע אנרגיה בזה, אנחנו רוצים לדבר על ללכת לכיוון של שיתוף. ואני רוצה להציע, אנחנו בעצם נחלק בינינו את הזמן, אני אדבר יותר על האתגר התודעתי של המעבר לפרדיגמה הפדרלית, אפילו לדבר קצת על השטח ועל הניסיון שלו באזור של ביתר וצור הדסה, ונדבר על זה. אני רוצה להציע שבעצם מעבר למהמורות ולקשיים העצומים שיש לנו בתחום של ביטחון ובתחום כמובן של תרבות פוליטית ודברים אחרים, שבאמת הקושי העיקרי שלנו, האתגר העיקרי הוא האתגר התודעתי, ולצורך העניין אני רוצה להציע אנחנו צריכים לעיין מחדש במושג הזה ריבונות, ובמה המשמעות שלו. בספר שאבא שלי, זיכרונו לברכה, פרופסור דניאל אלעזר, כתב לפני, זה הופיע ערב אוסלו, ספר שנקרא Two Peoples One Land, הוא פותח את הספר באמירה, בטענה, שהמזרח התיכון סובל מבעיה חמורה והרסנית של דגש יתר על ריבונות פוליטית. בעצם הטענה הבסיסית שלו היא טענה היסטורית שהמדינת הלאום האירופית שמבוססת על יחידות פוליטיות הומוגניות מבחינה לאומית, היא לא תואמת את המצב כאן במזרח התיכון, שבעצם המזרח התיכון מורכב במשך אלפי שנים מקהילות, מפסיפס של קהילות אתניות, והוא מוסיף שם בספר ששלום קיים באזור הזה רק בתקופות בהם הריבונות בצורה הנוכחית שלה מאוד מאוד מוגבלת באופן משמעותי, ובמקומה נעשה שימוש בעיקרון השלטון המשותף, ובאופן ספציפי מתייחס לתקופות של אימפריה. כן, האימפריה העות'מאנית זה דוגמה טובה לזה, תקופה שבה קהילות אתניות דתיות פחות או יותר ניהלו את עצמם. אני לא טוען שצריך לחזור למודל האימפריאלי העות'מאני, אני מקווה שזה לא, אל תבינו ככה את דבריי, לא נראה לי שזה הכיוון כרגע, אבל רק כמחשבה, בעצם הסיפור הזה של מדינת הלאום ההומוגנית הלאומית, ובכלל מדינת הלאום אפשר לדבר עליו במזרח התיכון כמודל מוחלט, הוא מודל שלא כל כך עובד פה, וישראל היא רק דוגמה אחת, אני חושב, של הסיפור הזה. אפשר להסתכל גם על השכנות שלנו בהקשר הזה ועל מה שקורה There we go. אוקיי. אפשר לדבר על סוריה ועל עיראק ועל לוב ועל מדינות אחרות שהורכבו מכל מיני קבוצות לאומיות ששמו אותם ביחד במדינת לאום, וזה לא כל כך עובד. עכשיו, למה אני מתכוון, אני באמת אקצר, למה אני מתכוון שאני אדבר על פדרליזם? אבא שלי נותן הגדרה בספר שהיא הגדרה אני חושב מאוד מאוד פשוטה ונגישה. כן, פדרליזם זה פתרון שמשלב שלטון עצמי או ממשל עצמי ושלטון משותף, פדרלי. כלומר, רמות שונות של שלטון, בהגדרה יש אלמנט משותף בתוך הסיפור הזה. ולמעבר הזה שלנו מחשיבה של הפרדה והשקעת האנרגיה והמאמץ להפריד בין האוכלוסיות, יש מחיר תודעתי, והמחיר הזה הוא יקר עבור הימין. כמובן שהמחיר היקר הוא לוותר ברמה העקרונית על אקסקלוסיביות של הקיום היהודי בארץ ישראל. זאת אומרת, לא, יש פה עוד עם, ואף אחד לא הולך לשום מקום. אני חושב שעבור השמאל הוויתור הוא לא פחות משמעותי, ובעיניי הוויתור המשמעותי ביותר בסיפור הפדרלי, וצריך להתייחס אליו, זה החלום של חלקים מסוימים של השמאל הישראלי, להפנות את הגב למזרח התיכון, ולהתנהג כאילו אנחנו מדינה אירופאית. חיים משותפים זה חיים משותפים יחד עם הפלסטינים. אנחנו לא הולכים לשום מקום על כל המשתמע מזה. זה לחיות עם הפלסטינים, למצוא מנגנונים לחיות יחד עם הפלסטינים גם במובנים פוליטיים. וזה המציאות, וכמובן שעבור הפלסטינים זה ויתור על הריבונות המלאה. ועבורנו, אני חושב, מה שמנחה אותנו בפורום הפדרלי זה שהרעיון של להתבונן במציאות כפי שהיא. כן, המציאות כפי שהיא, מציאות דו-לאומית, זו המציאות בארץ ישראל, בפלסטין, והכישלון של הפנטזיה של ההיעלמות של הצד השני, ולכולנו יש, לרוב האנשים כאן מהירדן לים, יש את הפנטזיה הזאת בווריאציות שונות. לפעמים הפנטזיה הזו היא לשים מאחורי חומה ולשכוח. לפעמים יש פנטזיות יותר אלימות של טרנספר בפועל של אחת האוכלוסיות, ואני חושב שזה גם מבחינה, אני אגיד שגם מבחינה דתית, אני תלמיד של הרב מנחם פרומן, אני אוסיף גם את האלמנט הזה, זה משמעותי להסתכל במציאות, לשמוע את המציאות כפי שהיא, ולא לנסות לכפות עליה את המודלים שלנו רק בגלל שהם מה שמתאימים לנו. עכשיו אני אגיד כמה מילים, גם מילים אחרונות, כי אני באמת רוצה לפנות את הבמה לפיל. מה זה 10? עברו 10 דקות, אוקיי, בסדר. אז אני אגיד ממש כמה מילים אחרונות. אז אנחנו, יש בתוך הפורום הפדרלי, אני לא אצל, ב10 דקות קשה קצת להגיע לרעיונות ספציפיים של מודלים, יש כמה וכמה מודלים על השולחן, אבל הסיבה שאני לא רוצה להתחייב למודל זה או אחר, זה בגלל שהאיזון המדויק בין השלטון המשותף לשלטון העצמי הוא משהו שצריך לצמוח מתוך דיאלוג של שני העמים. הצעד הראשון זה שינוי הפרדיגמה. בלי שינוי הפרדיגמה זה לא יכול לקרות, ולכן אני חושב שהמודלים היא לא הבעיה, הבעיה היא השינוי התודעתי. אז בהקשר הזה אני מעביר את המיקרופון לפיל, שידבר קצת, אני חושב, על השינוי התודעתי, לפחות ברמת המיקרו, כן, באזור שלו. אז תודה רבה.
Okay, good morning everybody. I'm going to be speaking in English today. I'm Phil Saunders and I'm a Jew who grew up in London and now lives in Tzur Hadassah in Israel, halfway between Jerusalem and Bet Shemesh, and right next to the Green Line. And for the last 10 years I've been one of the leaders of a coexistence project between Israelis and Palestinians in that area, which has proved very successful and robust, so much so that in May 2021, when there were very big problems all over the land, it was notable that the Israelis and Palestinians in our area managed to get along just fine, unlike the Jews and Arabs living in mixed cities like Lod and Akko. And so many questions started being asked about why is our model working, and we won the IIE Victor Goldberg Prize in 2021 for having been so robust. And I'm not an academic, but if I were, I might be looking at two particular features. One is that it may be that in our area we have the optimal level perhaps of proximity where we can be involved in economics in a symbiosis which is win-win, but we're also just distant enough that we can preserve our identities. And the other possible element to analyze is the fact that we seem to have a very interesting triangular dynamic. I live in Tzur Hadassah, which is west of the Green Line, and I would say we represent perhaps the Israeli identity. So on Yom Ha'atzmaut, you'll see huge Israeli flags celebrating Israel's Independence Day. And just on the other side of the Green Line is Beit HaElit, a large ultra-Orthodox settlement. And you will not see Israeli flags in there at all. You see Jewish symbolism, and I would say that they represent the Jewish identity more than the Israeli identity. And from that lens, when I look at the judicial reform that's happening, I see it's effectively exposed a rift that's always been there within Jewish Israelis, this perhaps conflict between two very important identities that we have, the Jewish identity and the Israeli identity, which has been brought to the surface. But in our area, we also have a town, a Palestinian town, Muslim, named Hussan. I won't go into too much details about the project itself because tomorrow afternoon Ziad and Orit are going to be talking about the specifics of that project. But what I can see in our area and how it relates to federalism is that we have a triangle of three very important identities: Israeli, Jewish, and Palestinian. And there seems to be a very interesting dynamic that because there's 3 points of this triangle, we're not stuck in the usual one against the other. And sometimes, for example, the Palestinians are sometimes the bridge between Tzur Hadassah and Beit HaElit. The relations are different. For example, Hussan and Beit HaElit get on principally for economic reasons or for interfaith, whereas Tzur Hadassah and Hussan have relations that are more based on cultural or political discussions. And recently, a Palestinian restaurant has initiated a project called Chulent Sheikh, where it's a Palestinian restaurant inviting all the Israelis in the area to come and eat traditional Jewish food. And suddenly, we have all the ultra-Orthodox and the seculars and the religious Zionists and everybody, okay, all in one place, and some very interesting discussions are happening. So this reality of a triangle that seems to succeed very well in our area brought me to start thinking about the possibility of a federal solution for the land overall, and that brought me into discussions with federalist partners such as Gidon, who just spoke, and Yoel from the Abrahamic movement, and Emmanuel from the Federation movement, and there are many others. And this led in time to bringing the Path of Hope and Peace project under the organization Challenge, which is an organization for conflict transformation connected to the theories that are well versed around the world, and to see about implementing them in this land in a tailor-made fashion. I have experience on the ground of a kind of testing proof of concept, and Challenge then decided to create a project called the Federal Forum, where we invited our federalist friends to begin working together, and that's been very successful. We are now working together, and I would say now this presents an opportunity today that there are a lot of people here representing the Land for All Confederation model, and from what I've learned in my area, I think it may be more complicated than simply a two-in-one problem, although it is very important to say that there are two peoples who love one homeland, but it's also the case that it seems that the peoples themselves are quite fractured internally, and that's what we're seeing with the crisis of the judicial reform on the Israeli side. But I think the Palestinians also don't seem to be too keen about being centrally governed from Ramallah. And so some kind of regionalization of autonomies does seem to be beneficial to give all of us, we are many different tribes, but at the same time, we do want to keep the fact that there are two peoples. And so if confederation is a two-in-one paradigm and federation is a many-in-one paradigm, then perhaps what we actually need is a many-in-two-in-one paradigm where we work together and create something that is hybrid. It would be something special and unique for this land, but we are a very unique land with very unique needs. And I think if we open up a conversation which hasn't really started yet, then I think some very important things could happen. So I hope that conversation now moves forward, and just say thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. The federal model hasn't really been detailed here, but I would just, as a political scientist, I'd like to highlight the difference between a federal and a confederal movement that are normally not that far in terms of the reality on the ground, but officially, de jure, in a federal state, there is one sovereign. There's one sovereign body that allocates authority, powers to subunits, whereas a confederal process is the opposite. There are several sovereign units that allocate powers upwards, say like the European Union or other examples in the past. So this is where we come now to Meron Rappaport, who is one of the founders and the leader of Land for All movement. Meron is a well-known journalist who's pioneering in critical journalism in Israel. He's won the Napoli Prize for a series of articles about the separation wall fence, and has worked for Yediot Achronot. In fact, he has had a scoop in 2002, I think, to be the first one to actually chart the map of where the wall is going to be built. And later on did many articles also in Haaretz, and now he's one of the leaders of Sicha Mekomit, local talk. I don't know why I talk to you in English now, but Meron will speak to us in Hebrew, על ארץ לכולם. בבקשה.
תודה, אני מאוד נרגש מכל האירוע הזה. זה באמת עבודה של הרבה מאוד שנים שאני חושב שמגיעה, למרות שכמובן זה האירוע הוא לא של ארץ לכולם, אבל בכל זאת. אני כן אקרא מכתב. קצת אני אנסה לתאר בעצם איך הרעיון הזה התפתח ואיך הוא יצא, זאת הכותרת של מה שאני אומר, איך הוא יצא מהשוליים, לא למרכז, אבל יצא מהשוליים. ואני חושב שהכנס הזה כאן מראה את זה. בקיץ 2012 התכנסנו קבוצה של כ10 ישראלים ו10 פלסטינים במלון בבית ג'אלה. לא הייתה לנו תוכנית מוגדרת, ולאותה תוכנית מוגדרת בוודאי שלא קראנו קונפדרציה, אבל כן היה ברור לנו שהארץ הזאת שבין הירדן לים היא ארץ אחת, שההפרדה בין יהודים ופלסטינים היא לא מעשית וגם לא רצויה, ושהיסוד לכל פתרון של ממש הוא שוויון ושותפות, שוויון לכל יושבי הארץ וגם למי שגלה ממנה, ושותפות לכל מי שחי ויחיה בה. אני באתי למפגש הזה עם טקסט שכתבתי זמן קצר קודם לכן, שנתתי לו את השם המופרך במכוון, אוטופיה מעשית. המסמך הזה הושפע ממפגש שהיה לי כמה שנים קודם לכן עם אקדמאי פלסטיני בשם פרופסור סעיד זידני, שהציג לי טקסט שכתב ובו הצעה שנראתה לי פשוטה ומהפכנית בבת אחת. לאמץ דגם נוסח האיחוד האירופי לפתרון הסכסוך הישראלי-פלסטיני. שתי מדינות עצמאיות השייכות למסגרת רחבה יותר, המאפשרת חופש תנועה ומגורים ביניהם. ההצעה הזו של זידני הדהדה בראשי במהלך מסעותיי העיתונאים בגדה המערבית, ברצועת עזה ובמזרח ירושלים במהלך האינתיפאדה השנייה. עד אז האמנתי שפתרון שתי המדינות הקלאסי, סיום הכיבוש הישראלי שהחל ב-67 תמורת ויתור פלסטיני על זכות השיבה, הפרדה בין ישראל לפלסטין וחלוקת ירושלים לשניים, צד ישראלי וצד פלסטיני, הוא הנוסחה הנכונה לפתרון הסכסוך. המסעות האלה שהיו הפעם הראשונה שבה נתקלתי באופן ישיר במציאות שמעבר לקו הירוק, ערערו בי את האמונה הזו. אני זוכר במיוחד פגישה שהייתה לי בכפר זטה, עם פלסטינים שעמדו לאבד את עצי הזית שלהם לטובת גדר ההפרדה והחמדנות של הקבלנים הישראלים שבנו אותה. אבל דקות ספרות אחרי תחילת הפגישה, במקום לדבר איתי על העצים שהם עומדים לאבד, הם דיברו איתי על האדמות שאיבדו באלף ב-1948, אף שהיו צעירים מכדי לחוות אותם כי נולדו אחרי הנכבה. הבנתי בפעם הראשונה שעבור הפלסטינים זכות השיבה איננה תכסיס שנועד לחסל את ישראל כפי שלמדתי לחשוב קודם לכן, אלא ביטוי עמוק לזיקה שלהם לארץ כולה שבין הירדן לים. פגשתי מתנחלים שאמרו לי, זה היה מיד אחרי ההתנתקות מעזה, שאם תהיה התנתקות שנייה בגדה המערבית הם יעדיפו להישאר במקומם תחת שלטון פלסטיני, כי, ציטוט, יותר חשוב להם לחיות בארץ ישראל מאשר במדינת ישראל. הם הזכירו לי משהו שאולי העדפתי לשכוח. חלק ניכר מהשיח הציוני נבנה על הזיקה ההיסטורית והרגשית לארץ ישראל, ובשיח הזה חברון, שכם ובית לחם, הן לא פחות מארץ ישראל, מרמת השרון או רעננה, אולי יותר. הרביתי לכתוב על מזרח ירושלים והופתעתי לראות עד כמה השכונות היהודיות והפלסטיניות בעיר מסורגות אלה באלה, עד כמה ירושלים הפלסטינית, בוודאי בעיר העתיקה, לא גובלת בירושלים היהודית, אלא חופפת אותה. לירושלמים אולי זה מובן מאליו, לתל אביבי כמוני זו הייתה תגלית. החוויות האלה לימדו אותי שכדי להכיל את הרגשות העמוקים שחשים בני שני העמים למרחב כולו שבין הירדן לים, וכדי להתמודד עם המציאות המעורבבת שכבר נוצרה כאן, יש צורך בתפיסה חדשה. לא אנחנו פה והם שם, כפי שניסו למכור את רעיון שתי המדינות לציבור היהודי בישראל, אלא תפיסה מורכבת יותר. נראה היה לי שהרעיון שהציג לי זידני כמה שנים קודם לכן, מבטא את המורכבות הזאת. מכאן נולדה בשבילי הפגישה בבית ג'אלה. כבר בפגישה ההיא הסכמנו על 5 עקרונות יסוד. שתי מדינות עצמאיות בגבולות 67, גבולות פתוחים וחופש תנועה, ירושלים עיר פתוחה ומשותפת, מוסדות משותפים לשתי המדינות, ותיקון עוולות העבר בלי יצירת עוולות חדשות. העקרונות האלה עומדים עד היום בלב מה שנהיה לתנועה שתחילה קראה לעצמה שתי מדינות מולדת אחת, והיום מוכרת יותר בשם ארץ לכולם. שני העקרונות האלה, חמשת העקרונות שכתבנו על הלוח בבית ג'אלה נוסחו, חודדו והורחבו מאז באלפי מפגשים. אבל ביסוד העבודה שלנו נשארה אותה תפיסה. בין הירדן לים חיים שני עמים, שניהם רואים במרחב הזה את מולדתם, וכדי שנגיע לפתרון יציב, בני שני העמים צריכים ליהנות משוויון לאומי ואזרחי מלא. הסכסוך הזה הוא איננו סכסוך גבול בין ישראל ופלסטין. זה סכסוך אינטימי, ועל הפתרון להיות אינטימי. כשיצאנו לדרך היינו בשולי השוליים. גם היום אני חייב להודות, אנחנו לא הזרם המרכזי בציבור היהודי ואפילו לא במרכז שמאל. אבל משהו השתנה. אנחנו רואים את זה בשנים האחרונות, אנחנו חשים את זה במחאות נגד ההפיכה המשטרית, שם הסיסמה בין הירדן לים דמוקרטיה או שוויון לכולם תופסת מקום הולך וגדל. אנחנו רואים את זה כאן, בכנס בוון לירה מדבר על שלום מתוך שותפות. גם רעיון הקונפדרציה שאנחנו מקדמים, אבל יותר מכך, עצם המחשבה שהפתרון לסכסוך הזה צריך לבוא מתוך סוג מסוים של שותפות שוויונית, יצא מהשוליים למרכז. אפשר למצוא כמה סיבות להצלחה היחסית הזאת, אבל הייתי שם את הדגש על שתיים מהם, האחת חיצונית והשנייה פנימית. חיצונית, התהליך המדיני בין ישראל לפלסטינים שהחל בהסכמי אוסלו ב-93 כפול לחלוטין. הפיצול הפלסטיני בין פתח לחמאס פגע קשות ביכולתם של הפלסטינים לגבש עמדה מדינית. האביב הערבי החליש מאוד את מדינות ערב, והקהילה הבינלאומית איבדה את האמונה שיש ביכולתה לפתור את הסכסוך. כתוצאה מכך נוצרה הסכמה כללית שגם אם פתרון שתי המדינות נשאר יחסית גבוה אצל הישראלים והפלסטינים ובטח בקהילה הבינלאומית, אין היום די כוח פוליטי להניע אותו, וראינו את זה גם בסקר שהוצג לנו. כפי שניתח יפה פרופסור מנחם קליין במאמרים שלו, ברגע שהחוץ, כלומר הקהילה הבינלאומית ובכללה העולם הערבי, נטש את הסכסוך, עלתה חשיבותו של הפנים, כלומר היהודים והפלסטינים החיים בין הירדן לים. לכך אפשר לצרף שני תהליכים שהם לכאורה מנוגדים. מצד אחד עליית כוחו של המיעוט הפלסטיני בתוך ישראל הריבונית וכניסתו לתוך המשחק הפוליטי והכלכלי, ומצד שני התרחבות ההתנחלויות ומחיקת הקו הירוק בתודעה הישראלית. שניהם, באופן שאינו תלוי בהכרח זה בזה, חיזקו את ההכרה שהפרדה, במובן שקידם תהליך אוסלו, כבר אינה רלוונטית. המסקנה שהימין הסיק מקריסת אפשרות ההפרדה היא שצריך לחזק את העליונות היהודית. זה ההסבר לחוק הלאום, זה ההיגיון מאחורי תוכניות הסיפוח למיניהם, זה מה שמסביר את ההצלחה של טרנספריסטים כמו איתמר בן גביר ובצלאל סמוטריץ' בבחירות האחרונות. ביניהם הדרך היחידה להיחלץ במצב הדו-לאומי שנוצר הוא הכרעה של הפלסטינים או גירושם. בהסכמה אם אפשר, בכוח אם צריך, אם לצטט את בניטו מוסוליני. מצד שני, העברת כובד המשקל אל הפנים חיזקה את מה שאני ואמיר פחורי כתבנו בכמה מאמרים כזרם השותפות. עד לפני 5 שנים שותפות יהודית ערבית בתוך ישראל ניצבה בשוליים של הפוליטיקה הישראלית. היום היא נעשתה מובנת מאליה גם במרכז שמאל היהודי, אף אם התנאים והתחביר של השותפות הזו עדיין לא נוסחו באופן מספק או לא נוסחו כלל. ההמלצות של הרשימה המשותפת על מועמדים מהמרכז שמאל, השתתפות מפלגה ערבית בקואליציה האחרונה, עליית ארגונים כמו עומדים ביחד, התרחבות בתי ספר דו-לשוניים, רק חלק מהדוגמאות לשינוי. זה לא תהליך לינארי, אנחנו רואים את זה בהדרת הדוברים הפלסטינים מהפגנות בתל אביב, ובהדגשת סמלים לאומיים כמו הדגל הכחול לבן וטיפוח השיח המיליטריסטי בהפגנות, שבהכרח משאיר את הפלסטינים בצד, אבל הערכה שלי אולי התקווה שלי היא שזו נסיגה זמנית, כי המציאות כופה את החיבור הזה. בהקשר הזה אני אוסיף איזה משפט שלו, חשבתי עליו, אגב, דברים שאמר שי, פרופסור שי לוי בהתחלה, אני חושב שגם העלייה היום של הרצון למעין פדרציה בתוך ישראלית, הפרדה בין חילונים לחרדים, היא דווקא הוכחה כמה שותפות היא הפתרון היחידי, כי הרי אין אפשרות אמיתית להפרדה בין חרדים, מה יעשו חומה בין בני ברק לבין רמת גן, מה יעשו? יעשו חומות פה בירושלים בין מאה שערים לבין רחביה, זה הרי זה בכלל לא סביר. הפתרון גם שרוצים זהות פרטית, פרטיקולרית, והיא חשובה, היא חייבת לבוא מתוך שותפות ולא מתוך הפרדה. על הרקע הזה, רעיון הקונפדרציה מיוסד על שותפות בין שתי מדינות עצמאיות בכל המרחב יכול להדהד ביתר קלות. אין פירוש הדבר שרעיון כזה נהנה מרוב, רחוק מכך. הוא מציב שאלות שקשה לענות עליהן כרגע באופן מספק. עתיד ההתנחלויות, זכות השיבה, ירושלים, פערים הכלכליים בין שתי המדינות, ביטחון ועוד סוגיות רבות אחרות. מעל הכל זה רעיון שדורש אמון בין שני הצדדים, אמון שנעדר כרגע לחלוטין. ראינו בסקר 80% מהישראלים והפלסטינים לא מאמינים לצד השני. רעיון השותפות במולדת גם מציג אתגר עצום בין שני העמים, בפני שני העמים. כשיהודים בישראל מדברים על מולדת, הם חושבים על מדינה יהודית. כלומר, גבולות המולדת זהים במידה רבה לגבולות העליונות היהודית. כשהפלסטינים מדברים על מולדת, הם מתקשים לכלול בתוכה את הזרים, כלומר את היהודים שבאו להתיישב בארצם. ראינו את זה גם בסקר של 93% שחושבים שהארץ הזאת היא שלהם. ועם זאת, רעיון המולדת המשותפת מביע את שותפות הגורל של שני העמים החיים במרחב שבין הירדן לים, זה לצד זה וזה בתוך זה, והוא מבטא את ההכרה בתלות ההדדית ביניהם. רעיון המולדת משותפת יכול לקחת את הדבר שהיום אולי היחיד שהוא משותף לשתי הקהילות היהודית והפלסטינית, הזיקה העמוקה שלהם לאותה כברת ארץ, ולהפוך אותה ממקור של מחלוקת למנוף להשגת הסדר מדיני צודק, ואפילו לתחילתו של תהליך פיוס, ובלבד שאותו הסדר ואותו פיוס יהיו בנויים על יסודות של שוויון, חירות אישית ולאומית וכבוד הדדי. תודה.
תודה רבה למרון רפפורט. מגיע לך עוד פרס על סיום לפני הזמן. אני חושב שזה תקדים בכנסים בעולם. כן. אני רוצה להוסיף בתור גיאוגרף, אתם יודעים שאני גיאוגרף פוליטי ומשפטי, שלא רק שהמולדת המשותפת היא איזשהו משאב, אלא היא גם דבר מאוד מאוד ייחודי. אין כמעט אף סכסוך בעולם שבו שני העמים מתייחסים לכל הארץ כמולדת בדיוק כמו העם השני. לא תמצאו את זה לא בבוסניה, לא תמצאו את זה בשרי לנקה, לא תמצאו את זה בקשמיר ובהודו, לא תמצאו את זה באירלנד, תמיד זה על חבל ארץ מסוים, לא תמצאו את זה בקטלוניה. פה הפלסטינים והיהודים מתייחסים לאותה ארץ שהיא ארץ קדושה בעיניהם, מנסים בסוגריים שאת הארץ הקדושה הזאת למוסלמים וליהודים יצרו הבריטים, אוקיי? הרי אין לה היסטוריה כמו שיצא, אבל הבריטים, ה-Historic Palestine, היא מה שכל פלסטיני וכל יהודי יגידו לכם שזאת המולדת שלהם. היהודים אולי יוסיפו את האוזן של הגולן בשנים האחרונות, אבל זה לא ממש משמעותי. אז תחשבו על זה עד... לא, אף יהודי היום, אחרי מות בגין וכו', כבר אף אחד לא מדבר על שתי גדות לירדן, אני חושב. אולי, אבל המולדת המשותפת היא חופפת, תחשבו על זה מבחינה פוליטית והיסטורית, עד כמה שזה ממש מתבקש. לחשוב על שותפות, כמו שמרון רפפורט הסביר כל כך יפה. כן, אנחנו, כן, היסטורית, כמובן, גם הדליטני, היסטורית שדיברו פה מקודם על דניאל אלעזר, אני מאוד שמח, סליחה שאני אקח עוד כמה שניות, אני מאוד שמח שאתה הבן שלו, לא ידעתי, הוא היה באמת הוגה דעות מאוד מאוד משמעותי, הוא אפילו חייץ אחורה את מודל הפדרליזם לתקופה המקראית ול-12 שבטי ישראל, שהם בעצם הביאו את התשתית לחשיבה הפדרלית גם העולמית, אז יש פה איזשהו ניסיון יפה לחלץ את ההיסטוריה, גם היהודית וגם של המזרח התיכון, שהיא בעצם ממסגרת את החשיבה הפוליטית היום. זה היה מאוד משמעותי בזמנו. אבל שוב, הגיאוגרפיה הייתה עד הליטניה, הגיאוגרפיה הייתה גם עד הליטניה, אנחנו לא יכולים לחשוב על זה במונחים של הפוליטיקה הבינלאומית היום. אני עכשיו מאוד שמח להזמין את הדוברים הבאים, ואחרי ההרצאה שלהם גם יהיה לנו זמן לדיון. יש לנו 3 דוברים שמייצגים את היוזמה הבריטית של ה-Israeli-Palestine Union, ואתם רואים כבר שיש לנו 3 שמות, ארץ לכולם, יש לנו את הפורום הפדרלי, ויש לנו עכשיו Israeli-Palestine Union, and they come from the Arab Center for Progressive Thought, something to that extent, and we have Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha, Hamza Ali Shah, and Adi Berkovits. I'll give you a short description of each one of them. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha is also a neighbor of mine from the Negev. Is a Bedouin doctor, a specialist in internal medicine, and currently acting as the Health Policy Director of the Task Force for Health Promotion and Equity in the Arab Society in the Israeli Ministry of Health. In 2016, she co-founded and managed Rudaina, an NGO that aims to prevent genetic disease in the Middle East. Rudaina was also her deceased mother that I knew very well. And she will obviously elaborate on the health aspect of the Israel-Palestine Union. Hamza and Adi are the coordinators and researchers of the Palestine-Israel Union project at the Center of Arab Progress in London. Adi is a researcher and activist. She graduated from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in sociology and anthropology before completing her MSc in human rights in London School of Economics. Hamza is a researcher and a writer with an international politics degree from City University in London, I assume, and an international relations in MS in King's College London. So the stage is yours, up to 20 minutes. Try to work it between yourself. You can take 25.
This is not ours. Supposed to have a presentation somewhere. לא. איפה זה אמור להיות? אני לא רואה את זה. רק אמרת עוד זמן ועשינו בעיה טכנית. המצגת שלנו. מה השם? זה יהיה על פי היו. אני בטוחה שזה נמצא פה. הנה זה. אוקיי, סליחה. זה על שמי ולא על שם הפרויקט. כמובן שפספסתי את זה. תודה רבה. בבקשה.
And then I'll sit down. Or should I stay here? Come back round. Ready? Need to wait for the moderator.
Okay, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this idea. We've had some wonderful thoughts already. It's a pleasure to be here, meet some of the people that we've engaged with via Zoom, and it's good to finally meet with a lot of these people here and really discuss an idea which is very necessary. Everybody knows the plight politically, and it's good to be able to engage. We don't all agree on everything, but it's good to have constructive discussions. And I'm here to present the Palestine-Israeli Union, a project that we are working at the Centre for Arab Progress in London. A centre that's always maintained a commitment to undergoing renewed thinking, and in terms of when it comes to crisis management and exploration of crises around the world. And we extended this commitment to the Palestine-Israeli Union, a project we initiated in 2022, last spring, and with a determination to produce work that can cover practical aspects and contribute to new understandings. and strategies when assessing the deadlock. So we recognise that there is a logjam at the moment. There's lots of different ideas, but nothing is moving. And we hope to. The objective of this is not to suggest that we have all the answers, but to at least begin contributing and expanding the toolbox of policymakers, civil society, and all the community leaders, actors who will be playing an integral role when we do eventually get to the stage of looking for renewed possibilities. Our fundamental objectives is to produce something that, like I said, will eventually be in use and help something that we hope to implement later on. But at the heart of it is our commitments, our principal commitments are the fact that we want structural change. It's not just about a solution, it's a just solution. Whereas too often you hear about things where people want to sort of discussing without understanding the intricacies of different communities, different aspirations of different communities, etc. And our paradigm is equality and interdependence. We place significant emphasis on everyday bread and butter issues. So I'm from the West Bank. I've been in the West Bank for the last few days. I can't sit there and tell my family members, my community, my neighbours that in 25 years' time things will get better. What about now? Freedom of movement is restricted. I lived moments away from the separation wall. It's hard to convince people that things will get better, but then promise them that it's going to be in 15, 20 years' time. There are restrictions at the moment. There are complex issues at the moment, and it's about making sure that we commit to long-term structure change, a significant overhaul, but at the same time recognising that there are things which need to be dealt with now, or at least begin thinking about them and not just come with kind of a long-term umbrella approach. And this is why our structural basis is the complete opposite of a blanket approach, and recognise that there is medium, long-term and short-term planning that is necessary, but fundamentally starting from a settler colonial framework. We take into consideration the different communities, their different aspirations, because at the end of the day, it is apartheid. It's the word that has been pushed. It was in the periphery. It's now slowly moving to the centre, which is good. To call it what it is, to call a spade, as we say in Britain. And once we begin from that framework, we recognise that the situation of people in Gaza, for example, in Masafir in Hebron, in the West Bank, etc., Jerusalem, it is a settler colonial issue, but that doesn't mean that every single person has the same challenge that they face every day. So we're starting from that framework, and we work from there to begin to address all the issues. We try to plug some of the gaps that exist in existing research to do with confederal solutions, two-state, one-state. And one of these is giving representation Palestinian voices. Too often it's been Western voices or kind of Israeli-centric voices talking from above and talking down to the Palestinians, or not taking into consideration the Palestinians and their ambitions. And we hope to change that and have more Palestinian representation because, again, in the spirit of the interdependence and the culture, the paradigm that we hope to foster of partnership and equality.
He'll come back, don't worry. So hi. Did we move it? Yeah. Okay. When we started the project, not so long ago, a year ago, the decision to choose a confederal solution came to allow us to give better answers to some of the main challenges we face when we discuss peace, without ignoring essential aspiration of Palestinians, Israelis, and, as been repeated again and again today, their connection to the land. But the confederal idea is not a new one. Significant work has been done for years, and in our work, we stand on the shoulders of others who have created meaningful guidelines for us to follow. So when we discuss confederation in the Palestinian-Israeli Union project, these are general guidelines and the principle that we have. But when we started doing our work and reading what's there, we felt that there is a shift, that we're starting our work and there's something moving. Because when we read, we saw there's still people writing about confederation from a perspective of separation. They're using the language of confederation. They're speaking about two states and one homeland, but we feel and we can see in the project and their solutions that at the end they come from separation. I won't. Okay, I'll continue. Sorry. When we started our work, it was clear to us that we want to come from the paradigm of partnership we felt it's there in the things we read with the people we meet, that the discourse is changing, is shifting, and we want to contribute to the discourse somehow. We want to use the things that exist in the paradigm of partnership, but also strengthen this paradigm, which is new and evolving. So the way we decided to contribute to it is by actually, we have our principles, we have, which were already mentioned before, I think, for all, and the things Meron said very much align with our guidelines in a lot of ways, to state model, but based on partnership with one geographical unit, Jerusalem as the shared capital, 67 borders, but open borders, with a lot of emphasis on freedom of movement, freedom of residency, in order to solve some of the challenges we face when we're trying to figure out how we can create two states without giving up equality, without giving up partnership, and using the interdependence existing, but shifting it towards a just and equal interdependence. So as we chose these as our guidelines, it was clear to us that we want to contribute more, and our way was to develop a model, to try to offer a model by exploring different angles, and this is what we started.
Yeah, so the terms that I'll show you now are terms that everybody's familiar with: land, statehood, security, borders, reconciliation. But if I went and asked every single one of you, you'd all give me a different answer about what that means in regards to liberation, in regards to sovereignty, and any type of solution, and everything attached to it. And we wanted to basically deconstruct those words, those phrases, and they are obviously integral, and they have different offshoots. And land, for example, you talk about urban planning. With statehood, talking about the economy, for example. Governance. With borders, you have several aspects to it as well. Reconciliation brings into the culture, the religious aspect. But the way that these concepts have been spoken about was, as I said before, kind of often not representative of Palestinian aspirations, often kind of offering a framework that doesn't change much on the ground. It's just a solution, and it's not true liberation, nor is it true sovereignty or freedom if they're still within an oppressive framework. And we hope to change that and change the way in which land, statehood, security, borders, and reconciliation are thought. And that is kind of the first stage. That's what we spent most of the first kind of few months working on, to begin almost redefining those terms, especially in relation to the frameworks that we've outlined and how we see the future. And that's not to suggest that we ignore the other aspects, because we often get asked, but what about, for example, 48 Palestinians living within the territories, refugees, etc., Gaza, Jerusalem. But only once we have a profound understanding of land, of statehood, of security, only when you begin to unpack those properly and understand that security is not just about the military. It's not just about, there's more to it than just the military. Statehood is about, particularly in the confederal model, it's not, for example, with Oslo we saw, where a lot of the oppression remained and intensified, actually, and so did the occupation. But it was had a Palestinian state been formed after that, it wouldn't have changed. It wouldn't have been justice. It wouldn't have had any aspect of freedom, very limited self-rule, etc. That isn't what statehood is, and that's not what statehood means to a lot of people. So it's unpacking those terms and kind of providing new understanding, so that new possibilities are imagined using kind of a new approach. And like I said, we do have a commitment to sort of medium, long-term, short, medium, and long-term. But the fundamentals is that we want to change the way in which these terms are thought of, and then once we begin that shift, it changes the way in which a solution is thought of, particularly pertaining to a confederal model.
So, as you can see,
Replace most of the Israelis, the 48 Palestinians, or their settlements?
what?
Well, we'll have questions later.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we have 20 minutes for questions.
Okay, so as you can see here, we took our 5 main concepts and explored them. We're trying to explore them from different angles to reach fresh ideas. And I'll give some quick example of why and what is the way we're looking at them before we go to our main study case for today with Yasmeen. So one which is unfortunately very relevant these days, and a lot of the days, is security. as security policies regarding confederacy and other solutions usually focus on the Israelis' perspective, typically don't challenge the mainstream security approach, which focus a lot of national security. We are putting human security at the center of analysis, and we understand that state capability for security doesn't always ensure safety to all citizens, as is very present in the insecurity Palestinians within Israel face and experience every day. Therefore, we explore how security will look under confederal system, under peace, as the definition of what security is, who is a security threat, which kind of security bodies will be necessary. All of it and more will need to be challenged and change. Security can also help answer a repeated question we receive, and I'm sure someone in the crowd has already this thought in mind. Okay, this is nice, but why are you talking about the future image and a future plan when today is so difficult and it seems so far away, a bit unrealistic? So first, we think creating this future image is essential to us to bring back hope, actively contradict the right-wing political plans with future vision that people can aspire to and unite behind instead of the current political void. And second, preparing a plan that answers some unspoken challenges, like, for example, what to do with the huge Israeli military industry. It can reveal some opportunities sometimes, like using and transforming the technology used for security for confederal future needs, like the environment challenge, like healthcare, and prevent mistakes such as privatization of the security system, as happened in other places. And now, we want to take a closer look at the healthcare system, a significant case study. This usually is ignored, even though it carries great importance to the people living between the river and the sea. Sorry.
Thank you. So this morning, Professor Asad Ghanem challenged us to think of specific issues in life and try to envision them in the future solution. I received from these two the challenge of envisioning the healthcare system in the future Palestinian-Israeli Union, and I was crazy enough to say yes. So I bear with me. I will try to take you through the thinking process and give our solution. But maybe we will start with what is the current status. So the current situation between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River is a fragmentation of territories. I guess all of you know that. And the fragmentation, actually the difference in sovereignty and sovereignties between the territories has an impact on healthcare and specifically healthcare providers in the ground. So when we talk about Israel proper, we see that, the sovereign is a democratic, some might say flawed democratic, but democratic state that has universal healthcare services for all, provided by 4 health medical organizations, HMOs, and access is somewhat free. It lacks equity between Palestinian citizens of Israel and Jewish citizens of Israel. But actually, this is a very efficient and effective and affordable healthcare system, which has its flaws. When you look at East Jerusalem, the East Jerusalemites are Israeli residents. It is, in a way, annexed to Israel. Most of you know that, I guess. And as residents, they are entitled to get healthcare services from Israeli HMOs. However, they don't have freedom of movement, so they can't really choose where to get treated. And also, this is the only territory in which the Israeli HMOs are allowed to provide healthcare through private franchises, which creates a problem in regulation, okay? This is what's going on in East Jerusalem, so it's kind of a no man's land. In the West Bank, we have areas A, B, and C, and others. And the main provider, especially for Palestinians, is the Palestinian Authority. However, they have the problem of lack of control over resources. They don't control movement, they don't control water, they don't control the transfer of funds. And when you don't have control over these things, it's really hard to control and regulate the healthcare system. Healthcare system needs electricity, needs water. You have to control it. So when we look at the current situation, we see that about 80% of the Palestinians who reside in the West Bank actually get treated in places external to the West Bank. Some of them are transferred to Jordan, Egypt, Gaza, and Israel, of course. So this also should be in mind. And lastly, Gaza. Gaza is under siege for over 15 years now. The main provider for healthcare is UNRWA. And again, most of them do not get good treatments, and the frequent military operations, like we see in these days, create a constant depletion in healthcare facilities, staff, and equipment. So all these should be in mind when we talk about the future healthcare system. So what are our challenges that we're trying to solve? First, the fragmentation, like I told you in the beginning. The fragmentation leads to multiple healthcare providers with almost no professional regulations, except for Israel proper. Second, we have a problem of access to any kind of healthcare personnel and facilities. And of course, I'm not even starting to talk about high quality healthcare. Third is the lack of a unified financial model. Financial model for healthcare systems is really, really difficult and complicated and complex problem to solve worldwide, let alone in this complicated territory. So we need to find a unified financial model for the PIU. And the fourth challenge is that we have severe shortage in medical staff, training facilities, programs, and essential medications and life-saving equipment. And we need to think about all of these when you think of a solution. However, there's one opportunity, and the one opportunity is that we already know that the Israeli model of healthcare system works, and works fine, and maybe can be a reference model. So when we envision the PIU healthcare system in the hopefully near future, but in the future, we understand that it has to have 4 concepts and principles that will be the basis for this model. First is that health is a basic human right and has to be provided equitably to everyone. As a result from this concept, we need full freedom of movement for everyone within the Confederation's territory. And of course, everyone should be eligible to access all healthcare facilities and insurance options, regardless of citizenship status and place of residence. And lastly, in order to actually make that happen, we need to put an emphasis on reparations, investment, and payments in the Palestinian healthcare system in the future. And when we envision the model is, let's say, based on or gets inspiration from the EU healthcare policy. Why? Because what we see in the EU is that each member state has its own fully functional, independent healthcare system. However, they have shared institutions that decide on quality care, medical licensing, policies of transfers of food and drug administration, and we need to think of the future healthcare system in the PIU as something similar. Both territories will have fully functional and independent systems, healthcare systems, that will have shared institutions that will work together to create some kind of, a unified financial model, unified medical licensing policy, etc., etc. So this sounds nice. How do we actually do it? Of course, this is not something that happens in one day. And the idea is that if tomorrow morning we will have, hopefully, a peace agreement that decides on a PIU, what will we do? So the first period will be the transition stage, and the first step should be opening the border and giving access to everyone. And everyone can access the current, what we already have, current healthcare facilities, of course, in Israel, but the idea is to give people the choice to be treated wherever they want. Of course, this is not something that can be achieved easily. There are security issues, and there is the issue of right of return, so it has to be gradual. But the idea is to open the borders and both sides, so let Palestinians access Israeli healthcare system, but also let Israeli healthcare system, and especially HMOs, get access to Palestine, what we call now Palestinian territories, in order for them to actually start in building facilities, clinics, hospitals, universities, etc., to start and bring more facilities and actually increase access to healthcare for everyone. The third thing that needs to happen when we talk about freedom of movement and access to healthcare, that we need to bring allow MADA, Magen David Adom, and the Palestinian Red Crescent services to reach every place within the Confederacy. And of course, we need to prepare. This is why I'm saying that this is a gradual process. The healthcare system has to prepare for an overflow of patients. So it needs, there should be a plan for recruiting physicians from abroad and also training both Israeli and Palestinian healthcare workers. And of course, the second step will be establishing a shared public health institution. And the reference model for this is not only my dream. It happened before in Northern Ireland after the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. They actually immediately founded a Department of Health and Social Security, and this was almost the only thing that survived the collapse of the first Northern Ireland Assembly, because it was a shared institution. And healthcare is an issue in consensus. So they actually use the collaboration around well-being and healthcare to provide a very robust and equitable services to all citizens. The next phase should be to actually build the infrastructure for the Palestinian healthcare system, which is, we know now, lacking very much and very fragmented. And it should be, building, like I said, building hospitals, clinics, labs, referral centers, training physicians, building roads and communications, and getting access to clean water and electricity, and of course, promoting health tech for-profit enterprises to actually create funds and get external funds. And this is also not something that we dream of. This is how the Israeli healthcare system was actually built before 1948, mostly by external funds, and what we know today actually started before 1948 by mostly philanthropic funds. The only hospital that was actually built after 1948 is Asut Ashdod. So this is also something that is a known model. And lastly, how do we fund it? There's an important concept of reparations. We cannot only rely on funds from philanthropy or from aid from other governments. It has to come from reparations from the Israeli side. First, because we know that Israel can, and second is that because it should be a future sustainable model. And maybe I will end by a quote that was actually said about South Africa regarding reparations, that reparations are not simply being paid back for harm suffered. Reparations involve acknowledging that something unacceptable took place, commitment to redressing people on the basis of rights that they have, and consequently trying to achieve cultural changes that diminish the likelihood that these things will take place again. And this should be a fundamental concept when we think of healthcare in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hamza Ali and Yasmeen. It was actually very good, in fact, even inspiring to see that you worked out the details, Yasmeen, because, you know, it's always very difficult to actually walk the talk, as they say, and you actually did that. I would also add one more thing, is that the movement may be also in the opposite direction, and that's we have the older people like us, we have the memory of the country that was open. Until 1999, 92, the country was open. So there were many Palestinians that came to Israel, but many Jews that went to Palestine too. For example, private medical services are much cheaper, used to be cheaper in Palestine. Palestinian dentists were making a lot of business at the time, not to mention cars and not to mention housing and other things. So it will not be symmetric, but it will be a lot of movement also. And I know one of my best friends that I wrote a lot with, Thabit Abu Ras, a Palestinian, purchased a house in the West Bank because it's so much cheaper than in Israel. So think about that as in terms of a confederation working in both ways. Well, we have time now for questions to this very important panel. Please ask a short question and present yourself in 1 or 2 words. Please start. And if you can stand so people will hear you.
In English or in English is.
I actually think Hebrew will be better here because the audience, but there is translation. No?
English is fine.
English, okay, please, yeah. Neutral language.
Yeah, my name is Aryeh Schonbrun. I'm from originally from New York. I made Aliyah 6 years ago. Part of the reason I made Aliyah was because I didn't like the states so much. I mean, like there's gun violence and like the transgender craziness is whatever. It's just like becoming like more and more uncomfortable, to live in Western society, specifically in the U.S., but it also, in parts of Europe as well. Do you think that some kind of resistance to the increasing, I would say, disintegration of the Western ethos and Western society into neoliberalism and some fascism as well, do you think that could be sort of a rallying cry for real participation and a shared interest between Muslims, Jews, Christians, everyone?
Okay, we'll take 2 more and then we'll let you answer. Please.
אני עורך דין וליד אבוטאי, אני במקור בנצרת. אני כבר 44 שנה בירושלים. אני חושב והחלטתי סופית להתמודד לעיריית ירושלים, למועצת העיר ולראשות העיר. השאלה שלי, כל העקרונות של המדגם שאתם מייצגים, הדגם שאתם מייצגים, אנחנו יכולים או צריכים להכיל את זה מיד בירושלים. אם נצליח בירושלים, אז יכולים להצליח בכל ארץ ישראל או בכל פלסטינה. האם זה דבר הכרחי שנתחיל אותו בירושלים? וזה יישום, זה מעבדה בירושלים. אחרי זה אם נצליח, אז נעביר את זה לכל הפלסטינה.
I'll translate briefly for Hamza and for Phil. He was asking lawyer Walid, who is moved to Jerusalem for Nasra, was asking whether Jerusalem itself can be the first place to implement those ideals and principles as a laboratory for the rest of the country. Okay, one last question. Yeah, please.
I will ask in English. So
English or Hebrew?
Don't need to translate. My name is Mario Shechtman. I'm Executive Director of Challenge. And my question is about the concept of national self-determination that I didn't hear so much in the presentations, and I have two versions. The first one for the Confederalists. Both models, you refer to the 1967 borders as the basis for the Confederation. Don't you think that by doing so, you are actually saying each nation that they need to still renounce to their self-determination in the other part? For the Palestinians on the side of Israel, Jews on in the West Bank and Gaza, and for the Federal Forum, Oren correctly pointed out that the federation has one sovereign and devolution towards the regions how will both nations feel that they are fulfilling their self-determination in such a setting?
Okay, so we have Western culture, we have Jerusalem, and we have the details of Confederation, Federation in terms of the model that you propose. So shall we go? Do we have another microphone, like a mobile microphone? You have them here, yeah? Yeah. So I suggest we go from Phil and move in this direction. And think about another round of questions after that. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay. I will do my best to answer all three questions. I'll start with Jerusalem. I think, yes, Jerusalem, of course, is such a fundamental, it's the hub of everything, although I will add that I think Hebron also has a very interesting role as well. But effectively, you're asking a question, should we start by going straight to the heart of the issue, or should we grab low-hanging fruit first and work our way inwards? And I personally don't know. I think I'm very much about getting results, and so I think it sounds like you were talking about healthcare being something that could already be advanced. So for me, but I believe everything should work in parallel, in my belief. With regard to your question about the situation that is happening now, that we're lots and lots of internal pressures, yes, I think that can be a catalyst. We need to recognize that different people have different needs in this land, and we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And so, yeah, I really do believe, in the same way as I said in Jerusalem, we should, the question there that we should work on multiple tracks, I think we should be working on multiple fractures all at the same time, rather than just focusing on one first or something. This is a very complicated, multicolored land, and so we need something that meets all of those needs.
I was asking about a shared interest
Well,
in fighting Western imperialism.
all right, so I will answer that in connection to Mario's question. Of course, we need many things that are shared, things that we can agree on and work together. I believe economics and infrastructure and environment are things that we all have to work on.
I'm willing to make a statement on the idea of
Yes. Oh, you want me to be specific about Western imperialism? All right, I will be drawn on it. Okay, I believe this is a land where East meets West. I don't think we should be led by anyone. We should work out what works for us here. We have to work out in this land what works for people, crucially for the people that are living in this land, although not forgetting there are many people outside who also have valid interests. But yeah, we should not be led by the outside. We need to find something that embraces all the different kinds of cultures and identities, and we should avoid there being any clash where we end up fighting West versus East, religious versus secular, left versus right, principles versus pragmatism. Why not? Let's work on all of it.
I'd like to intervene because we said short question, but also short answers. So let's scale up the speed now. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and make it short. So I'll start with self-determination, Mario's question. Yes, of course, both sides have to, self-determination is essential, and that's why a one-state solution, I think, won't work for anybody, because both sides have to feel that a level of self-determination, and that's the challenge of reaching a balance between self-rule and shared rule. I mean, shared rule, there must be a shared rule. I think that the point I was making was that self-determination doesn't necessarily have to be is the same as full sovereign statehood. I don't think that those two things are not synonymous. That was my point. With regard to Jerusalem, I mean, I'm willing. I don't know. I think that would be. I think we can start, and we have a friend here from our forum, Emmanuel Shachaf, who is of the Canton approach, and we've spoken about it in the forum. There is a plan to cantonize Israel inside the Green Line, and I think that having some kind of federal system within Israel, I would say including Jerusalem, as a beginning before creating a federal system with the Judea and Samaria, that would I would be supportive of that.
Oh.
Just one point about the West,
quickly yeah.
About the Western imperialism. I will say that I think that Oslo and the idea of separation comes from an agenda of that is, I would call it secular liberalism, which I think is not necessarily what many of the people where I live are interested in, both Jews and Palestinians. And in that sense, I think that federalism or confederalism is a more appropriate approach, in the sense that it allows local communities to maintain their way of life, whether it's liberal or not. So.
Okay, thank you.
For the first question, the answer is easy, is no. I don't think that it could be a common ground. Yes, of course, there are different sections of the Israeli and the Palestinian society. Some of them are very liberal, some of them are not liberal, but that it will be the common ground, not liberal or anti, that's not a starting point, so the answer here is very easy. As for Jerusalem, it's a very complicated question. I think on the one hand, sure, yes, the answer could be very short, yes. But I think that without developing the idea of sharing of the whole of the land, it will be difficult to do something. But after listening to Yasmeen and understanding that some things could be done now, yes, I think Jerusalem could be a starting point. For me, it was a starting point. I think for me, as someone who lives in Tel Aviv, seeing Jerusalem was a starting point to talk about the Confederation. As for a right of self-determination, yes, it's very fundamental. That is why we are for the two-state solution. Still, we are for 67 borders. Nothing holy about them, but these borders are accepted internationally. Nothing is very sacred about them. But yes, I think it is a challenge and could be helping the idea of sharing that there will be, there is a Palestinian minority in Israel today, and it will continue to be, and that there will be a Jewish minority in Palestine. I think it will help develop, yes, right of self-determination, but also the idea that we share the land, the fact that there will be two minorities in both states.
Okay, very quickly, the three of you, so we have time for another round.
We can have another round.
If you don't have.
Does it work? Can you hear me?
Close.
No. Okay. So I'll try to add our perspective on things. So we also see Jerusalem as part of the solution in a lot of ways, as a way we can envisage shared life very easily. When you live in Jerusalem, when you're part of the city, it's much easier. And I think it was a part of a lot of people's political change, being part of Jerusalem. I do think that some things can happen, but also when we look at the model and take a zoom out from it, I think a lot of things will need to happen in order to have the funding, the enough structural change to happen, to facilitate a change also in Jerusalem. We don't want to, because things are so unequal now, there is a lot of things that will need to happen, shift, to create also just Jerusalem model and not some kind of squeaking model in Jerusalem. And we're also aware of the problem of thinking about transition and what can happen if transition is stuck in a certain point. We're aware of the history, and we do want to get to a place where things can start changing, but people will feel better in their lives, in their education, in their rights, and not feel like they were they were fooled again with another solution, that they don't get what they want from. So I think somewhere in the middle of starting, but also understanding things needs to happen on the ground. People need to feel the change, to believe in it, and not to get stuck in the middle.
And to connect Walid and Mario, you cannot extract Jerusalem from the Jewish colonization of Palestine. The Palestinians will not have a separate solution for Jerusalem without self-determination for the Palestinians, which is well beyond Jerusalem. That's why I think Jerusalem as part of a model can work, even as a separate province maybe, but as part of a solution where the Palestinians get rid of the colonial regime and get self-determination. And that connects the two of you. But I'd like to hear more from the audience, and at 1:05 we have to finish. Hamza, did I stop you? Sorry, yeah. So let Hamza complete, and then we'll have two more questions.
Yeah, just to echo much of what's been said, we do see Jerusalem as part of the solution, not the problem. So often you see, as we discussed in the literature and other discussions on models, that people push, like, for example, the right of return, refugees, self-determination. They kind of push those topics to the fringe. We see Jerusalem as a mixed city, religious attachment, cultural attachments, and that can be a microcosm of the situation that we hope to reach, and the reality on the ground between the community at the moment. And so by dealing with Jerusalem, you almost design a blueprint for the future. So we do agree that you can use it as a blueprint to move forward. Just on a point on Western imperialism, which I'm sure we can go on forever about, what I would say is, you mentioned different communities, and you mentioned sort of a hint towards cultures, and I would be careful about kind of the right and how that's being pushed. In the sense, I agree it can be a catalyst, but if we fall into the trap of, I can tell you as a British Palestinian Muslim, I know a lot about culture wars and Britain, but if we fall into like dividing communities and pushing certain people and blaming them for what we might call a clash of civilizations, I think that is dangerous territory. So just thought I would clarify that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we have one more round, and we have to finish in about 10 minutes. So we'll start. 5 minutes? Well, give me 5 more. Because what, you think the food will disappear? Okay, so 2 quick questions. Nira, we'll start with you. You have the microphone. I'm sorry, Walid, because you already had. Noga, do you have the microphone?
דוד מלובני, שאלה לי לצוות.
Okay, you start and then Nira.
אוקיי, שמי דוד מלובני ושאלה לי לצוות. אנחנו יודעים שבאוגוסט האחרון 22 היה ניסיון של מדינת פלסטין, ככה לפי דעתי אני רואה את הדברים, לפנות לאום להפוך את הסטטוס שלהם ממדינה משקיפה למדינה חברה. היה לזה רוב, רק ארצות הברית איימה בווטו ובהפסקת הסיוע למדינת פלסטין, אז העניין הזה ירד. בהנחה שהווטו ירד, והם יתקבלו להיות מדינה חברה כמו מדינת ישראל ושאר המדינות, איך זה ישפיע על המודלים שלכם ואיך זה ישפיע על השקפת העולם שלכם?
אוקיי, שאלה מצוינת, אני רק קוטע אותך בגלל הזמן. אוקיי, פרופסור יובל דייוויס מאוניברסיטת איסט לונדון. תדליקי. קרוב. אני חושב שכן. תדברי, כן.
אני אנסה לדבר בכל רם. I speak in English, so no need to translate. I'm that kind of couple of things. First of all, I'm very surprised that with all this range of solutions, the solution of the Bund, of the Autobauer, of separation of the people from the land, which will avoid this paradox that you say you cannot divide the land, but then you go back again to the old two-state solution that you also admit doesn't work, is not part of it. And in that relation, I want to remind the principle that in other settler colonial states, especially the indigenous people, said, we don't own the land owns us. And if you go into the principle of the land owns us, you don't have this zero-sum game who owns the land, and you can start working on it. And the last point again, which relate, I was very happy that finally the whole notion of the asymmetry as a settler colonial state and the need for reparation was mentioned, because to pretend that the whole thing here is symmetrical and the whole question is only a question of consciousness rather than of power and history and violence is a very sanitized utopia that I don't think can go very forward. A representation in the United Nations, symbolic as it is, notwithstanding.
Okay, thank you very much. Very quick answers. One or two sentences each. Yeah, we start with Hamza.
There was a question about recognizing the state of Palestine in the UN. Will it help as a full member state?
How it will influence on your opinion?
I think it will have. I guess from our perspective, we have our kind of our principles and how we see things as a centre and a project. But I guess internationally speaking, it may have an impact in terms of recognition, legitimacy of a Palestinian state. But at the same time, I don't see it being too much of an obstacle. I don't see it as being something that can curtail or impede any potential progress. Or I just think it would. I think add to the legitimacy of the project that if it's recognised as a state, how does that state then function? How would it then be legitimised? How would it then continue to run? So I unless I've misunderstood the question, I think it would perhaps be a bonus, but one that even without it doesn't really impede the project nor the need for a robust push for a solution, an adequate solution.
I'll try to answer your question. So we didn't go into that in details, but we do want and trying to tackle the idea of land in general from different perspective and to understand, first of all, how the people feel their connection to the land. And it is hard to ignore the reality where both sides feel a deep connection to the land, feel ownership right now, even though it will be easier if it was the other way around. And I think your father also wrote about it and about how in Judaism you're supposed to not be that connected, and the idea of Shemitah. And so I think we are trying to also bring to the discourse other ways of thinking about the land and respecting the land, and also bringing more issues of environmental crisis that we're all facing as we fight over this land, and a lot of the time without ignoration completely to how we harm the land. So we have this in our mind, in our thinking, but we still. Our point of departure is that both nations have the right to feel whatever they're feeling right now. We don't want to fight this feeling. We want to use this feeling and show it's not a zero-sum game. The fact that you feel connected to this whole land and someone else feel this connection doesn't mean that we need to fight over it. We can share it. And maybe that will also be the switch of maybe we can share it and we can start actually thinking about this land in a better way. I hope it answered it.
Okay, maybe the last four even shorter answers each. Yeah.
It could help recognition of Palestine as a full member state. I don't. It will help. I don't see it really changing dramatically things, but it will help. It's a positive step, but I don't see it having immediate. As for land, about reparation and about, I think the whole idea of equal rights, whoever lives in Israel, Palestine know that today we don't have equal rights. So the very fact that you go for equality means that some one side will have to give up a lot of privileges, and this is the Jewish Israeli side, yes. If it was not said clearly, yes, it's the nucleus of the issue of the Israeli Jews giving up privileges.
I'll try and make it short. With regard to the UN, I agree with Hamza and what was said here. I don't think it would make very much difference, and in fact, I don't think that anything that the UN does really makes very much difference in this region, to be honest.
Except declaring the state of Israel.
Yeah, well, but that was quite a while ago. That was quite a while ago. It was a very different UN, by the way, 1947. And I just want to say the line that you quoted, that we belong to the land and the land doesn't belong to us, I think that was fundamental to the thinking of my teacher, by Menachem Fruman, and I think that that's an essential role in the federal thinking. The idea that that we're not talking about, as I said, about political sovereignty and about ownership. We're talking about attachment to the land. And I think the one difference that I would say between, we didn't really go into the issues of the differences between federalism and confederalism. It has to do with the idea of drawing borders and do we have to actually create two states? And I would refrain from creating two states and then creating a confederation either in one direction or the other. And I think that's the advantage of the federal solution, is that you don't have to draw those borders and get into that whole discussion. But that's for
But you're also
conference.
opposed to the exclusive ethnic control of land, right? You're opposed to that idea that comes from Western thinking, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's not so taken for granted in Israel, because people do think about, this is our land, this is Jewish land, it's becoming
exclusivity
stronger.
doesn't work. I mean, I think it's in practical terms. It's
That's
just
no,
not
in
a
response to Nira's questions, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the paradigm is very much about sharing, and you talked about the fact that if we view ourselves as belonging to the land rather than the land belonging to us, then maybe we can not fight over the land anymore, but start sharing and coexisting within it. You're right that there are some asymmetries. We need to take those into account, can't ignore them, so we have to be pragmatic. I would say with regard to reparations, I'm not sure it necessarily all needs to fall at Israel's door. The international world cares about what and they could be very helpful in supporting financially. With regard to your question about the United Nations, I think the United Nations can help and want to help, but sometimes have pushed us down a direction that we didn't end up wanting to go with the best intentions. So I don't think we should let our tail be wagged by anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Two small points for the end. One is that Adi was mentioning that while we're talking about solution, there is a grave reality on the ground. Let's not forget that it's very asymmetric. About 2 Palestinians every day have been killed since the beginning of the year in the West Bank, but also inside Israel, with a total disaster of personal security and mafia gangs, of course, with our government allowing that to happen, and in the West Bank through the occupation and the colonial rule. So let's not forget that while we're talking about this solution, this grave reality is happening. But it's very important to fight this reality, that you have a horizon. You have somewhere you are actually aspiring to go to. And this is a thing where the combination of the two.